The voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Our conversation with State Representative Jim Struzzi is presented by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Todd.
It's good to have you with us here this morning. And you're in Harrisburg yesterday,
yes,
returning to session and working on the constitutional amendment. Tell me about it.
Well, this is a really important bill for all of Pennsylvania. Essentially, Senate Bill 1166 came over from the Senate. We have to concur today on the final vote to move it to the governor, to move it through the legislature. And essentially, what Senate Bill 1166 does is it gives a voice back to Pennsylvania residents, back to the legislature when it comes to emergency declarations. And it's stemming from the whole COVID response right now. So essentially, what it would do is after 21 days, it still gives power to the governor so that he or she can react quickly in the state of emergency. But after 21 days, the extension of the disaster declaration must be voted through the House of Representatives and the Pennsylvania Senate. So what you see happening right now where the governor continues to extend, would no longer be allowed to occur without the approval of the legislature. And I think that's so vitally important as we see how many people now are asking for the disaster to end so that, certain things can get back to normal. But that's part of what Senate Bill 1166 would do. It would also ensure that there is no denial or abridgment of equal rights during a disaster because of race or ethnicity. So I think that's important as well.
Now, the procedure, of course, according to the state constitution, is that in order to amend it, it has to pass this session and then in a consecutive session, so the next session as well, and then it would be put before the voters on a referendum vote, correct?
That is correct, yeah. That's why we're trying to move it quickly now so that we can vote on it in this session and then in early 2021 vote on it again so it could potentially be on the ballot for the voters during the primary next year.
Yeah, and that would be a pretty quick movement through the legislature. So obviously when you have something like this, you need bipartisan support. And I would guess that in this case, that would be fairly or relatively easy to get. Yes?
Well, we will see how the debate goes today, Todd. I know there was a number of amendments that were put on the bill yesterday that we did not discuss, and I think it'll be interesting today to hear what people have to say, because I know that speaking with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are pretty much fed up with the length that this is occurring and the fact that the governor isn't working with either side of the legislature at this point when you have 3 million people claiming unemployment and a lot of other things that are just frustrating to people that aren't being addressed. I think that our colleagues on both sides of the aisle want to see this move forward, and I think it's fair. It still gives the power to the governor to make those quick decisions that need to occur during a disaster, but then it puts it back into the hands of the people so that those of us that speak for the people, much like I argued last week for House Bill 2025, should be allowed to speak on behalf of those people and place those votes that we were elected to do.
The governor, of course, last night, the administration hinting that it may impose new restrictions again. And our poll question this week is about whether people think that Indiana County will move back to yellow. And surprising the number of people that think, the governor is going to move us back to yellow at some point. But that's early in the poll process. You mentioned the other bill. This legislation really addresses that as well, doesn't it?
In a way, yes. It gives power back to the legislature that we don't currently have. It was very frustrating when we passed House Resolution 836 concurrently with the Senate, and the governor chose to ignore it, and the Supreme Court ruled against it. That resolution is still in play, though. I should add, Todd. It went back to the governor again for his veto, and if he does veto it, I believe we will have a vote on the House floor to try and overturn that veto. But I would like to take a minute to clarify some things. I know a lot of people, when they heard about us seeking to end the disaster declaration, they thought that all of the benefits that they're receiving, the streamlined unemployment process, and a lot of those other things that are in place during a disaster would go away. They would not. I think that's something that people need to be reassured of, is that the governor can immediately enact another disaster declaration, but one that's more streamlined, one that's, more appropriate to the situation we're in now and not the situation we were in back in March. And then in addition to that, we have a number of bills already ready to go in the House that would address those issues related to unemployment and other disaster response needs. So I don't want people to think because we're seeking to end the disaster declaration that all of the benefits that come with that are helping people right now through the COVID crisis would go away. They would not. It simply allows more flexibility. And, the one-size-fits-all approach that the administration has been taking really isn't working for Pennsylvania. And that's why we wanted to end the disaster declaration so that he could declare another one that perhaps, puts different restrictions in place for the urban areas and keeps areas like Indiana County and some of the more rural counties that have, fewer cases, keep them in a different framework.
Well, then with the new constitutional amendment, should that actually eventually become state law, could a governor not then declare a new disaster emergency and just keep it going in that way? Or is that being addressed in this bill?
In this bill, it would require legislative approval before he can declare another disaster emergency. You can't simply extend the existing disaster declaration beyond 21 days, and unless it's extended by a concurrent resolution. And then it would also require that, when we do pass a concurrent resolution like H.R. 836, that the governor has to abide by that.
Okay. All right. My concern there was that the governor could just change the wording and issue something new, and in that way still exert the same sort of powers that he has been exerting all along. And I think it's important for us to understand as well that we're not just addressing Governor Tom Wolf and the Wolf administration. This is something that would change the Pennsylvania Constitution for all future governors and the way that the state legislature is able to have a say as well. That I think is one of the most important aspects of the whole thing.
Well, absolutely, Todd. We've not been through anything like this COVID response, in our history. And we're learning new things about how our government is set up, and it's become clear through this, extended disaster declaration that the way the Constitution is written right now is not necessarily good for all the people of Pennsylvania. And that's why I think this constitutional amendment bill is so important, because it will, change the way we react to these situations in the future. And that's what the people of Pennsylvania want. I cannot tell you how many emails that I've been receiving for people begging to end this disaster declaration and allow some independence as far as the reaction, as far as how people are being treated, how businesses are being treated. The government overreach is simply crushing people right now. And I understand a lot of people still have many concerns related to the health aspects of this, which I respect and appreciate. And I've had a number of conversations with our constituents on those lines too. But I think that the balance that needs to be struck is not there yet. And I think that's what this constitutional amendment would do.
How separated is the disaster declaration constitutional amendment from the executive order powers that the governor is exerting with the Reggie, with previous Governor Rendell talking about California emissions? Those seem to be vital issues that need addressed as well.
And they are directly related. The governor is giving extensive executive powers during the disaster declaration. So that would change as well as far as what he is able to do related to state resources, spending state dollars. And he spent millions and millions of dollars during this COVID crisis without any accountability. And that's simply not how our government is supposed to work. We are here to vote for those expenditures, and that has not occurred. And you're absolutely right. It's unfortunate that this governor believes that he can do everything on his own without respect to the House of Representatives and the Pennsylvania Senate. That's exactly what my House Bill 2025 was aiming to do. Is that's to at least give some voice back to the General Assembly and back to the people of Pennsylvania. One man should not be permitted to make decisions that affect the entire Commonwealth without appreciating all the consequences that come with that. And that's what House Bill 2025 would do, and I believe that's what Senate Bill 1166 would do as well. Yeah,
that's one of the biggest concerns that I am hearing and that I have, is that a governor can execute an executive order such as the Reggie, and in so doing tie the state for years after he's long gone from the governor's office, and the state is having to abide by what this governor in this day decided. And meanwhile, those rules stay in effect and crush industries such as, in this case, the coal-fired power plant industry.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how you feel about climate change, Pennsylvania entering into RGGI would be an economic disaster. Numerous experts during the few public hearings that we've had and the few Zoom meetings have testified to that end. There's a reason that the Pennsylvania Chamber and the National Federation of Independent Businesses came out in strong support of House Bill 2025 because they understand those consequences. There's a reason that we had 18 different trade unions from all over Pennsylvania, including the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia building trades, supporting House Bill 2025 because they know that as soon as we enter into RGGI, all of that industry is going to go to Ohio and West Virginia that are not RGGI states, and we would be the only fossil fuel based energy producer in RGGI. So I'm very pleased. I know you were on vacation last week, Todd. Welcome back. But I was very pleased that we had bipartisan support for HB 2025 last week. We were able to get that through and send a clear message that the people of Pennsylvania are terrified of entering into RGGI.
Yeah. State Representative Jim Struzzi with us here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. So the constitutional amendment, the main order of business yesterday, and I would assume still on the docket for today. What are some of the other things that you're looking at?
Well, this is really the main reason that we're here today. There's a number of other bills, some related to the election that I think are important. There's a lot of concerns with mail-in ballots and how those are going to be counted. So there's a couple of bills related to that. There's also one that's related to the COVID response, and that is House Bill 2549 that would allow counties to make the decisions on how they reopen. So most of the reason we're here, we're not here in the summertime, Todd, but because of the pending election and the COVID issues right now and the COVID responses, those are the main reason that we're here, because they are timely, and obviously it's important that we address those things as soon as possible.
The PSAC is having its meeting today to determine fall sports. The state yesterday or over the weekend announcing that map where you can go see return to school plans. Education is really at the top of everybody's minds right now. We took a little bit of a break of a couple of weeks to celebrate the end of the last school year, but we knew it was coming. Schools having to file their return to school plans. What are your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, I've heard from most of the school districts, at least in the area that I represent, and there are a lot of concerns with the masking requirement that came out from the governor's office a week or so ago. I completely understand that those concerns, particularly when it comes to children in kindergarten through fifth grade. It's going to be very hard to get those young kids to wear masks all the time, and I think there has to be more flexibility. I'm reaching out to the Department of Education myself, asking for some flexibility when it comes to the mask requirement, if social distancing can be adhered to. I know that there's a concern with the spike in numbers, but I do think it's related to an increased testing, and I think the number that you really have to look at are the number of hospitalizations. It's unfortunate that this is happening again, but I think that the bottom line is we really do need to get the kids back in school. I know from a personal perspective, my kids really suffered during the spring without having the in-classroom experience, and I'm one of the parents, and I know many other parents, at least in the Indiana area school district, want to see the students back in the classroom. So I hope that that's something that we are able to see happen here this fall. Yeah,
a lot of damage can be done if those kids are forced to go all online come the fall.
Yes.
State Representative Jim Struzzi, I think we could keep this conversation going for quite some time with a whole lot of different areas of concern.
Certainly are.
We're going to have to get you back to work there, though, with your colleagues in Harrisburg. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Absolutely, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160 and AM 1160 and